Welcome to the Quotive Corner. Today's quote is 16 words from a philosopher who lived roughly 2,300 years ago. And somehow, those 16 words describe something about what we lose as we grow older and what it costs us, more precisely than most modern psychology manages in entire volumes. The great man is he who does not lose his child's heart. That's Mencius, known in Chinese as Mencius, a Confucian philosopher who lived in China during the 4th century BCE. He is widely considered the most important Confucian thinker after Confucius himself, and his central philosophical project was built on a single conviction that set him apart from many of his contemporaries, that human beings are innately good, not neutral, not a blank slate to be written on by circumstance, genuinely, originally good, and that what corrupts us is not our nature, but the conditions and pressures that cause us to abandon it. And given that central conviction of Mencius, that goodness is not something we build toward, but something we are born with and can lose, the quote lands very differently than it would from a different philosopher. He's not telling you to be more childlike as a self-improvement project. He's telling you that the child's heart is already the thing worth having. The great man is the one who managed not to lose it. So, what is the child's heart? Mencius described it specifically elsewhere in his writings as the heart of commiseration, of shame, of modesty, and of right and wrong. In simpler terms, the natural capacity to feel with others, to recognize injustice instinctively, to respond to beauty and suffering without calculation. Children do these things before they learn not to. They cry when they see someone hurt. They share without being asked. They laugh without self-consciousness. They ask the embarrassing, honest question that adults have learned to suppress. They are moved by things that adults have learned to manage their response to. The loss Mencius is describing is the process by which that natural responsiveness gets gradually replaced. Not all at once, gradually. The world teaches you, through repeated experience, that the open heart is a liability. That vulnerability costs you. That the person who laughs too freely or cries too readily or asks the naive question gets managed, dismissed, or embarrassed. And so you learn to calibrate, to moderate, to protect yourself from the full impact of things that would otherwise move you. You develop what we might call sophistication, which is in part the learned capacity to encounter the world with less of the heart you were born with. Mencius is saying that the great man, the person of genuine character and genuine humanity, is the one who resisted that process, who kept the responsiveness intact, who stayed movable by things worth being moved by, curious about things worth being curious about, honest when honesty required a kind of courage that sophistication would advise against. This connects to something I discussed in a prior episode where Bruce Lee pointed toward, that the beginner's mind, the mind that hasn't yet been shaped by expertise into narrow channels, often sees things the expert can no longer see. The child's heart is the emotional equivalent of that. It hasn't yet learned which feelings are permitted and which ones require suppression. It hasn't yet been trained to manage its responses to fit the social expectations of a given room. And that rawness, that unmanaged directness, Mencius is telling us, is not immaturity. It's proximity to something real. Think about the adults in your life who carry this quality. They're not naive. That's a common confusion worth clearing up immediately. The child's heart Mencius describes has nothing to do with ignorance of the world or inability to function within it. The people who seem to have retained it are often among the most capable and clear-eyed people you know. What distinguishes them is not what they don't know, but what they haven't suppressed. They still get genuinely excited about things. They still get genuinely sad about things that deserve sadness. They still ask the question that the room has implicitly agreed not to ask. They still find wonder in things that most adults have learned to process as ordinary. Rick Warren, in another episode, gave us the observation that true humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. The child's heart, in Mencius's framing, is a precondition for that kind of humility, because the child is genuinely less preoccupied with self-presentation than the adult has learned to be. The child isn't calculating how the response will land. The child is just responding. And that directness, before the world teaches us to second-guess it, is a form of freedom that most adults have traded away so gradually they barely noticed the exchange. There's also something worth naming about what Mencius means by great. He's not describing fame or power or achievement in the conventional sense. He's describing greatness of character, the quality of a person's inner life and their genuine engagement with the world around them. By that standard, the person who has retained the capacity to be genuinely moved, genuinely curious, genuinely honest, even under the social pressure to be more managed, is great in a way that no external achievement can confer or confirm. Dostoevsky, just last episode, gave us the harsh and dreadful nature of love in action versus love in dreams. Mencius is pointing at the same territory from a different angle. The child's heart is the heart that loves in action, that feels before it calculates, that responds before it manages. And keeping it alive through the long process of growing up, taking on responsibilities, accumulating experience, and learning what the world expects of you. That is the work Mencius is describing as the mark of greatness. Now, the honest counterpoint and clarification, because that's what I do on this show. Not everything about a child's heart is worth preserving. Children are also impulsive, self-centered, unable to delay gratification, and incapable of the sustained, considered judgment that adult life requires. The child's heart Mencius is describing is not the whole of childhood, it is the best of it, the responsiveness, the openness, the wonder, the honesty, not the tantrums, not the inability to consider consequences. Part of growing up well is developing exactly the capacities that distinguish adults from children: judgment, patience, perspective, the ability to hold complexity. The great man Mencius describes has those capacities too. He just hasn't traded the child's heart to get them. That balance, grown up in capacity, childlike in heart, is perhaps the most difficult thing to maintain across a full human life. The world applies constant pressure in one direction. It rewards the managed, the sophisticated, the strategically calibrated. It is patient with the loss of wonder and impatient with its expression. Keeping the child's heart intact under those conditions is not passive. It's an active, daily, often quiet resistance to the forces that would have you become less than what you were born to be. Mencius thought that resistance was a mark of greatness. 2,300 years later, it's hard to argue with him. Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one made you think about something you used to feel freely, that you've learned to manage, and whether that management has cost you something worth recovering, that's worth some genuine reflection. And reflect on this: wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. I'll see you in the next one.